If I had known that morning that a single cup of coffee could burn away nearly 7 decades of self-respect, I would never have stepped into the kitchen. The Seattle sky was veiled in a thin layer of mist, autumn sunlight streaming through the large window and spilling gold across the tiled floor. Emily's kitchen, my daughter's kitchen, gleamed like something from an interior design magazine. I sat at the long wooden table, holding a white porcelain mug with the Fremont Bridge painted on it, a souvenir I had bought back when I still had the strength to drive all over the city. Steam curled upward, the smell of coffee rich and heavy like damp earth after rain. I had been living here for 18 months, ever since my heart surgery. Emily said it would be convenient to take care of me if I stayed with her, and I believed her. In those early days, she poured me coffee every morning, asked about my health. This morning was no different, except the coffee smelled stronger. The way I knew Mark, her husband, preferred it. I thought nothing of it, expecting another quiet start to the day. My grandson Tyler came in, phone in hand, music thumping from the small speaker. He dropped into the chair across from me without so much as a hello. "Grandpa," he said flatly, "can I borrow your credit card? I need something for my YouTube channel. Just about 5,000. He said just as if he were asking for spare change. I took a sip of coffee, set the mug down. "Tyler, $5,000 is not a small amount. You just bought a new computer last month, remember?" I kept my tone gentle, hoping he would understand. The air in the room seemed to thicken. Emily stood at the counter, her hands around her own coffee mug, eyes not meeting mine. No words, only a silence so dense and cold it felt solid. I had once thought silence was space for consideration. Now I knew that for Emily, it was the space she took to gather momentum. Without warning, she stepped toward me. For a moment, I thought she would sit down and talk. But she didn't. Her wrist flicked, and the entire mug of hot coffee came crashing over my thigh. The burning tore through the thin fabric of my pants, searing into my skin. I shot to my feet, the mug hitting the floor and shattering, the sharp crack of ceramic mixing with the sound of hot liquid spreading in dark streaks across the tiles. The heat still clung to my skin as Emily folded her arms, her eyes cold as glass. "If you are going to be that selfish, then leave this house today. This is not a charity." Her voice was precise, each word like a policy declaration. I stood there, coffee dripping from my pant leg, my palm imprinted with the sting of heat, my heart pounding like a hammer. Tyler said nothing, just shifted in his seat, eyes on his phone, as if what had just happened was an old clip he had already seen. I looked at Emily. For a fraction of a second, I thought I saw some flicker of hesitation in her eyes, but it vanished, replaced by a calculating gaze. She was not asking me as a daughter asks her father. She was weighing a resource, money, property, whatever I still had, and she had decided I was no longer cooperative. $5,000 for a camera, I repeated, my voice low, one hand braced against the table for balance. "I have paid the utilities here since the day I moved in, and I have never once asked you to cover my medical expenses." Emily shrugged, her lips curling into a thin smile. "You should remember you are lucky I let you stay after the surgery. Without me, you would not even be able to walk." I wanted to say something, a rebuttal, an accusation, but what came out instead was only a long breath. Not because I was afraid, but because in that moment I understood clearly. The daughter I once knew had been gone for a long time, replaced by someone else. Someone willing to see me as a burden once my usefulness had run out. I bent down and picked up a shard of the broken mug from the floor. It was small, a streak of pale blue paint running across it, part of the Fremont Bridge. It had once been a whole picture, now just a fragment. I held it in my hand and saw myself in it more than ever. "I will leave, and when the time comes, I will not return," I said, my voice neither raised nor shaking. Emily blinked, as if unsure I meant it. She turned away, took another mug from the shelf, poured herself more coffee. No one asked if I was burned. No one brought me a towel. I turned toward the living room, each step leaving drops of coffee on the floor. In my mind, the alarm bells I had ignored for the past year and a half were ringing again. And this time, I had no intention of silencing them. I never thought I would reach the age of 68 standing in my daughter's kitchen with hot coffee running down my leg. Looking back over my life, I can still see how hard I tried to fulfill my role as a father, sometimes at the cost of my own years. I had been a freelance architect in Seattle, taking small projects so I could work flexibly. My wife, Julia, died when Emily was 14. The small house on Queen Anne Hill felt so empty that even the sound of a door opening seemed to echo, as if the walls themselves knew we had lost half our family. Emily grieved quietly, never crying in front of me. I hid my own tears in late nights, redrawing plans until my eyes blurred. Work was going well then. I was invited to join a large firm with promises of a high position and a generous salary, but it meant full-time hours and overnight deadlines. I refused. I chose to be home in the afternoons to meet Emily after school, take her to piano lessons, and walk together through streets lit with neon signs to our favorite Japanese noodle shop. I told myself I had a lifetime to work, but she only had one childhood. Years passed. Emily grew up, graduated college, married Mark, a young real estate broker 2 years her junior. I stood among the fathers of the brides, watching my daughter in her white dress, thinking I had done the most important thing a father could do, guide her to a stable life. I lived alone after Emily moved out. Those years, I split my time between design consulting and teaching part-time at a local technical school. On days off, I sketched old buildings, met old friends at the architecture club. It was one of the rare periods when I truly lived for myself. Then, at 66, the first heart attack struck. I remember that morning repairing the porch roof when the pain clamped around my chest and dropped me to my knees. After bypass surgery, the doctor advised I have a family member close by for at least a year. Emily was the first to suggest that I move in with her and Mark. You'll have the ground floor, your own room, near the kitchen and bathroom, Emily told me when she visited me in the hospital. I'll cook, Mark will drive you to your appointments. You won't have to worry about anything. Just focus on getting better. I believed her, partly because I was weak, partly because I thought it was the kind of care I had always hoped for. At first, it felt like a warm family again. Emily made me coffee every morning, asked how I slept. Mark shared stories from work at dinner. Tyler, 17 then, liked showing me his latest videos online. I felt touched, thinking my years of solitude were over. Then Emily began to make suggestions. One evening, while I was sorting through bills in the living room, she said, "Let me handle the expenses. You don't need to worry about paying utilities one by one. I'll set up automatic payments." I hesitated, but her reasoning seemed sound, so I could rest and avoid stress. I agreed. A few weeks later, she brought up my savings account. "Just let me keep all of it for you. If anything happens, I can act quickly. I won't spend it, just for safety." Her tone was light, but her outstretched hand was steady. Again, I agreed. Finally, the deed to the Queen Anne house, she said, "If it's in my name, it will be easier when we need to handle medical or legal paperwork. Everything will still be yours." I was tired after a cardiac checkup, unwilling to argue. I signed, trusting my daughter to keep her word. At first, it all seemed reasonable. I no longer had to manage expenses. Emily bought groceries, paid bills, even ordered new furniture for my room. But gradually, the habits that had been part of my life began to disappear. I used to walk to Cary Park early in the morning, but Emily insisted I stay home and let her handle breakfast. I used to meet old architect friends at our cafe, but she would say another time because she needed the car. Mail addressed to me stopped arriving. Emily said she had taken care of it. Friends called, and she told them I was sleeping or busy. My world began to shrink, like a blueprint with its lines erased until only the parts someone wanted remained. At first, I reassured myself. This was care. But deep inside, another voice whispered. This was control. I pushed it away, unwilling to believe that the girl I had once stayed up all night nursing through illness would want to strip me of my independence. Yet, bit by bit, I found myself moved out of my own life. My bank sent email notifications, but I had no password. The deed to my old house was stored somewhere I didn't know. My drafting machine was put in storage to keep things tidy. Looking back, I realized this loss hadn't happened in a single day. It came like the Seattle fog, light, thin, then thick enough to close around you until you could no longer see the way out. I had let my daughter hold the only compass. and one autumn morning saw that the direction she had chosen would never lead me home. In the weeks after that morning with the spilled coffee, I began to see more clearly the invisible threads that had wrapped themselves around me without my noticing. Calls from old friends became fewer, then stopped altogether. Invitations to the retired architects club I used to attend disappeared. Later I learned Emily had told them I was too busy recovering to go out. Former neighbors from Queen Anne dropped by a few times, knocked on the door with no answer, and left cards I never saw. My world had shrunk to four walls, a small porch, and a dining table where I no longer sat at the head. Mark gradually took that place, speaking loudly about real estate deals, slipping in lines that sounded like jokes but weren't funny at all. "Don't worry, Dad, we'll handle everything. You just need to breathe." I did what any architect does when he sees a problem in a structure. I started taking notes. In the drawer of the small desk in my room, I kept a worn leather notebook. Whenever I noticed a suspicious charge on the credit card screen, purchases from electronics stores, online games, even a short trip to Portland, I wrote down the date, the amount, and a short note. I didn't have full access to the accounts, but whenever a notice came through the family's shared email, I quietly copied it into the book. Alongside the notebook, I began keeping copies of all my personal documents: birth certificate, passport, insurance, the maintenance contract for the old house. Each time Emily left the file cabinet open, I took a few minutes to photograph pages with my old phone, saved them to a memory card, and hid it inside the thick spine of an architecture book on the shelf. One afternoon, while Mark and Emily were out at a party, I found in the file cabinet a copy of the Queen Anne house deed, still in my name, but clipped to it was a loan application with a signature I had never written. I didn't take it, just photographed it and saved it to the memory card. I knew I couldn't handle this alone. The first name that came to mind was Harold Jensen, my classmate from the University of Washington, who later became a civil lawyer before retiring. Harold had helped me with paperwork when Julia died. He lived just over 10 kilometers away, near Gasworks Park. I hadn't called him in 5 years, but if there was anyone I could trust, it was him. That day, I waited until Emily and Mark were at work and Tyler was still asleep. I took my phone outside under the pretense of watering the porch plants, then dialed Harold's number. 3 rings, then his voice, warm and unhurried. "Ben, it's been a long time. I need to meet you. Privately, as soon as possible." He didn't ask why, just said, "The old cafe near Gasworks. 10 tomorrow morning." The next morning, I told Emily I was taking a short walk in the park for heart exercise. She only glanced at me and nodded. I put on my coat, walked to the bus stop, my heart beating fast, not just from illness, but from the knowledge that I was stepping outside her control. Harold was already at the cafe, an Americano in front of him. He looked older, almost all white hair, but his eyes were as sharp as when he stood before a jury. I sat down and told him everything, starting from the heart surgery, moving in with Emily, that morning with the coffee, and the unusual transactions. Harold listened without interrupting. When I stopped, he tapped his fingers lightly on the table. "Ben, I think you're dealing with financial abuse inside your family, and you can't stay there another day if you want to keep what's yours." I nodded. "I know. I want to find a new place, check the legal status of the house and accounts, and if possible, protect everything I have left." Harold took a sip of coffee. "Have you thought about a trust?" "I have, but I don't know how to do it. I'll help, but first we need evidence. And you need to get out to keep your documents safe." We sketched a plan right there on a napkin. Gather copies of all important documents: house deed, bank accounts, insurance, will if I had one. Open a private mailbox at a post office near where Harold lived so all legal mail came directly to me. Contact independent senior living communities. Harold knew a few safe ones near the coast. Prepare to set up a trust to remove my assets from Emily and Mark's reach. Before we left, Harold put his hand on my shoulder. "Ben, this has to be done quietly. Once they know, they'll try to stop you." On the way back, I felt both anxious and relieved. Anxious because I knew I was stepping into a subtle legal battle. Relieved because for the first time in months, I had a plan of my own, and it wasn't in Emily's hands. In the days that followed, I began to act. I carried a thick envelope every time I went out. Inside it, the memory card, document copies, and my notebook. I slipped Harold batches of papers whenever we met at the post office or the cafe. I also started researching independent senior living communities in Tacoma and along the coast. One place on Harold's list stood out, Golden Shore, with ocean views, open spaces, and most importantly, each resident kept their own room key and no one entered without being invited. Just thinking about it made me breathe easier. Every night, sitting in my room, I could hear the TV in the living room, Emily and Mark's laughter, the sound of Tyler's keyboard. I no longer felt like part of that family. I was just a guest, waiting to be pushed out. The only difference this time was that I would leave before they could throw me out. I didn't know exactly when Emily would notice the small changes, a few files missing, a few letters no longer on the kitchen counter. But I knew that when the time came, I would be ready. And when it happened, the story would not end with an apology or an argument. It would end with a signed contract, a seal, and doors locked from my side. From the morning Emily poured coffee on me, each day ticked away like the countdown to an explosion. I had said I would leave that day, but I knew I needed to prepare to go in a way Emily could not undo. I waited, quietly gathering documents, recording every unusual expense. That morning, Seattle's sky was heavy, the chill pressing against my skin. I opened the medicine cabinet and saw my heart pills down to the last few. I reached for my wallet to head to the pharmacy, but when I opened it, the slot for my bank card was empty. I searched every pocket, every drawer. Nothing. I was certain I had left it in my wallet the night before, after buying a few supplies to organize documents for Harold. I walked into the kitchen. Emily stood at the counter, one hand holding her phone, the other stirring coffee. Mark sat at the table, eyes on his laptop. "Emily, have you seen my bank card?" She looked up, measuring my reaction. "You probably left it somewhere. I didn't touch it." Her answer was too quick, too neat, as if rehearsed. Back in my room, I shut the door and used the landline in my drawer to call the bank. The woman on the line spoke evenly. "Mr. Callahan, your card has been used several times this past week. Purchases include electronics at Best Buy, furniture in Bellevue, and an installment payment for a travel service, totaling over $8,000. I gripped the receiver, canceled the card immediately. "Yes, sir, but some charges have already processed, so you will need to file a formal dispute." I set the phone down, feeling heat rush to my face. In my mind, everything I had collected, the photos of documents, the expense notes, lined up. Only one more piece was needed to confirm it all. When Emily and Mark stepped out, I opened the household file cabinet. In the real estate folder, I found the Queen Anne house deed, my name still listed as owner. But clipped beneath was a loan agreement secured against the house, signed Ben Callahan in a handwriting that wasn't mine. I photographed each page and sent them to Harold. His reply came almost instantly. "Ben, that's forged. You need to leave today." I sat on the bed, taking a deep breath. That coffee had been a slap to my dignity, but this forgery was a blade aimed at what remained of my life. I pulled my old suitcase from the attic, brushed off the dust. Into it went what couldn't be replaced. The family photo album, my drafting tools, a few changes of clothes, an envelope with personal documents, and my notebook of every questionable transaction. In the hidden compartment, I placed the memory card holding every piece of evidence. As I zipped it closed, a car pulled into the driveway. Emily and Mark had come home early. Footsteps crossed the wood floor. I gripped the suitcase handle and opened my door. Emily saw it, then looked at me. "What are you doing?" her voice carrying both surprise and suspicion. "I'm leaving," I said evenly. "Where you can't just," she began, but I cut her off. "I won't be coming back." She narrowed her eyes. Mark stepped into the doorway, arms crossed. Neither of them said a word to stop me. I walked straight out. At the curb, Harold waited in his silver sedan. He opened the trunk for my suitcase, then the passenger door. "Let's go," he said simply. The tires crunched over wet leaves as we pulled away. In the rearview mirror, I saw Emily on the porch, her figure shrinking until it vanished when we turned onto the main road. We drove in silence for 10 minutes, the wipers sweeping away steady rain. Harold finally said, "You did the right thing. Staying would only give them more chances to take." I nodded. The grief for the daughter I had once known was still there, but alongside it came something else. Relief, like shedding a suit of rusted armor. When we pulled into the Golden Shore parking lot, the salty air slipped in through the window. The low white buildings reflected the gray sky, and rows of crimson maples stood by the gate, as if welcoming me. Harold shut off the engine and turned to me. "This is the first step, Ben. Now we get to work." I stepped out, my hand still wrapped around the suitcase handle. Each step along the stone path toward the lobby carried me further from the shadow of control and closer to something I thought I had lost: the right to decide my own life. Golden Shore was unlike any place I had ever lived. Low white painted buildings with gray-green sloped roofs, wide glass windows opening toward the sea. Each morning mist crept up from the water, laying a thin veil over the row of maples along the stone path. Here, no one entered another's room without knocking. People greeted each other when they met, but never pried. That was exactly what I needed. Privacy, freedom, in the sense that I owned my own space. Harold came almost every day in that first week. We sat at the wooden table in the small library of the complex, papers spread in neat stacks. He called the bank, faxed the partner law office, and one morning he placed a thick file in front of me. Ruth Callahan Irrevocable Trust. A trust in my name. Inside it listed the house in Queen Anne, a separate savings account, and everything else Emily had not yet managed to reach. "Once it's in here," Harold tapped the file cover, "no one, not even family, can take it out without your permission." I turned each my mom, signing slowly. Each stroke of the pen felt like closing an old door and opening a new one. After that, Harold contacted the bank directly to freeze all joint accounts that had once borne my name. Any suspicious transactions in the past 6 months would be reviewed, and I, not Emily, would be the only one notified. I thought back to the many times Emily had said, "Don't worry, Dad, I'll take care of it," and realized that was when everything began to slip from my hands. Now, there was nothing left for her to take care of. 3 days after the process was completed, I knew Emily would come looking. I wasn't wrong. That morning, I was in the Golden Shore common room, a wide space with glass walls facing the garden and the distant sea. A group of residents played chess in one corner. Others sat reading the newspaper. I chose a seat by the window, a steaming cup of tea before me, and an architecture magazine in hand. From that spot, I could see the main entrance. A black SUV stopped at the gate, and Emily stepped out. She wore a long camel coat, her hair tied back, walking quickly as if pressed for time. Behind her was Mark, face frozen, hands in his pockets. They went to the reception desk. I couldn't hear the words, but Emily's posture and gestures were familiar. Chin lifted, one hand moving lightly as if giving orders. The receptionist, a young woman named Laya, shook her head and pointed to the rules board. "Guests may only meet residents with a direct invitation." Emily leaned in, said something, but Laya's polite firmness did not waver. I didn't look away. The feeling was different now. If this were Emily's house, I would be called out, cornered into a conversation. But here, I was the one who decided. Emily turned, her gaze sweeping the common room, stopping when she saw me. Her eyes were sharp as a blade, but a flicker of surprise crossed them. She walked quickly to the glass door, stopping just outside. Mark followed, arms crossed, eyes avoiding mine. I stayed still. No movement, no signal. I set my tea down, meeting Emily's eyes through the glass. She tapped on the door, once, then twice. I tilted my head as if I hadn't heard, then turned back to the magazine. Outside, Emily began speaking, her lips moving fast. I couldn't hear, but I could guess the familiar lines. "Dad, come out and talk. You misunderstood. I just want to explain." I turned the page slowly as if the knocking was nothing more than wind rattling the frame. Mark finally said something to Emily, but she brushed him off, staying where she was. Her face was tense, eyes blazing. Leia stepped out from behind the desk, walked to the glass door, spoke to them, and pointed toward the gate. Emily turned back, lips pressed tight, then suddenly spun and walked away. Mark followed. I watched them leave the grounds, their steps quick, shoulders stiff. The gate closed behind them with a soft creak, like a period at the end of a long sentence. I sat for a few more minutes, then lifted my cup. The tea was cold, but I took a slow sip. For the first time in years, I was in the position to decide, not to be decided for. That afternoon, Harold stopped by. I told him briefly. He smiled, unsurprised. They'll try again, but now you have a wall, and this wall isn't easy to break. I nodded. This time I won't open the door. We went out to the yard, sitting on the wooden bench facing the sea. Waves lapped softly at the shore, the distant cry of gulls in the air. I realized the real stage today wasn't in a courtroom or at a family dinner, but right here when Emily had to stand outside, and I chose silence. Silence not because I was weak, but because I knew my voice now lay in the legal papers, in the signature on the trust, in the bank freeze orders. No shouting, no arguments. The balance of power had shifted, and this time it leaned entirely toward me. 2 days after standing outside the glass doors at Golden Shore, Emily began calling. At first, it was just one call in the evening while I was sitting in the common room, reading an architecture magazine. I saw her name appear on the landline screen, Emily, and let it ring until it stopped. The next day, she called 3 times, less than an hour apart. The voice she left in the voicemail box tried to sound gentle. Dad, I think we should talk. Things have gone a little too far. I'm sorry if I made you uncomfortable the other day. It's just, I'm worried about you. I listened to all of it without skipping ahead, then deleted it. I had learned that sometimes silence is the clearest answer, but Emily didn't give up. On the third day, Mark joined in, a familiar male voice, deeper but unable to hide the awkwardness. Hi, Dad, it's Mark. We just want to settle things. There are a few financial matters that need to be handled, and I think you can help. Not much, just a short-term loan. I didn't answer. I left every message, every email untouched, neither deleting nor responding. Harold had told me, every line, every recorded word could be evidence. The following week, letters began to arrive. Not the printed kind, but handwritten envelopes sent straight to the private mailbox Harold had just registered for me in Tacoma. One was from Emily, the handwriting unmistakable. Dad, I'm sorry for everything. I know I did wrong, but I'm also in trouble. Tyler's car broke down, and he needs it for school. We have to get it fixed right away, and we're short on cash. Just $3,500 we'll pay you back, I promise. Inside the letter was a check for $3,500. It took me no more than 3 seconds to see the problem. My name was printed on it as the account holder, but the signature in the bottom right corner wasn't mine. The handwriting was rounder, more even, and familiar enough that I could clearly picture Emily sitting at the kitchen table signing it. I slid the check into a document pouch in my desk drawer and added a note. Received, October 14th, forged signature. That afternoon, I took the pouch to Harold's temporary office in the public library. He put on his reading glasses and examined each detail. This signature isn't yours, he said firmly. No, I replied shortly. Good. We won't deposit it. We won't respond. We'll keep it exactly as it is for evidence. Harold immediately called a woman named Karen Morales, a legal specialist in elder financial abuse cases. I sat and listened as they discussed the check, previous suspicious withdrawals, and a credit loan contract Emily had forged my signature on. Karen suggested compiling a file to submit to the Elder Financial Protection Unit under the Washington State Department of Justice. Within just 2 days, we had a thick file. A copy of the forged check, the credit loan contract with the fake signature, a list of unexplained withdrawals and recordings of some of Emily and Mark's voicemails where they asked for money while dodging explanations. Karen came to meet me in person at Golden Shore to take my statement. She was about 50, short black hair, sharp eyes, but a warm voice. Mr. Callahan, your choice to remain silent from the start was the right one. It meant all their communication stayed in a recordable form, not turning into back and forth arguments. I nodded. I've lived long enough to know that once you say too much, you give people the chance to twist your words. She smiled faintly, turned on her recorder, and began asking questions about the relationship, about me giving Emily my documents, about how I discovered the unauthorized transactions. I answered directly, without detours. Each time I recalled it, I saw more clearly how everything had been arranged. It started with Dad, just rest, I'll handle it, and ended with them signing my name on a check. When the session ended, Karen stood to shake my hand. From now on, leave the rest to us. If they contact you, keep everything as it is and forward it to me or Mr. Jensen. That evening, as I sat on the balcony of my room at Golden Shore, the sea black as ink under the moonlight, the phone rang again. Emily, I watched it ring, then silenced it and placed it face down on the table. The sound of the waves and the salt air were enough to fill the space of anything I might have said. The next day, Mark sent an email with the subject line, "Help us just this once." The body was a single long sentence repeated again and again. "For Tyler's sake, Dad." There was no apology, just a list of reasons why I should give them money. I printed it and added it to the file. I began to notice something strange. The less I responded, the more their tone shifted, from gentle, pleading, to irritated, and finally to veiled threats. Emily left a voicemail. "Dad, someone is putting bad ideas in your head. You'll regret turning family into the enemy." I listened, saved it, and sent a copy to Harold. He only said, "Even better. It shows they're losing control." Over the following weeks, I continued receiving letters, emails, and messages. Some envelopes had no sender name, but inside was still Emily's handwriting, sometimes with an invoice supposedly proving an expense, all unrelated to me. Each evening, I sat at my desk, sorting the evidence into separate document pouches, handwritten letters, voicemails, emails, forged documents. Watching the files grow thicker, I no longer felt like the passive one. Each page was a brick in the wall between me and them, a wall no empty apology could climb. One Saturday evening, Harold stopped by with a large envelope. Inside was confirmation from the Elder Financial Protection Unit. My case had been accepted and was under investigation. If necessary, it would be referred to the prosecutor's office for criminal charges of forgery and elder financial fraud. I set the envelope on the table and took a deep breath. This wasn't joy, nor was it revenge. It was something else. The validation that I had done the right thing, that my silence wasn't surrender but strategy. Emily and Mark still didn't know that every message, every letter they sent was now part of an official investigation file, and I had no intention of telling them. Sometimes real power lies in letting people step right into the trap they set for themselves. In the early days at Golden Shore, I still kept the habit of waking at 6 in the morning, just as I had when I was a freelance architect. But instead of rushing into a shirt, opening my laptop, and answering client emails, I put on a light jacket, took my camera, and walked down the brick path leading to the shore. Each morning, the waters of Tacoma Bay were a different color. Some days, a pale pink light spread across the surface like a thin sheet of silk. Other days, the clouds were thick as cotton, stretching all the way to the horizon. I began to capture those moments, not to show anyone, but to remind myself that I was still living, truly living. Morning walks were also when I came to know the walking group at Golden Shore, 3 women and 2 old men, all retired. We often met at the little cafe by the main gate, always ordering the same crispy waffles and black coffee, talking about the weather, the distant sailboats, and local news. No one asked about my past, and I didn't have to explain anything. That quiet was a form of respect I had been missing for many years. One afternoon, as I was sketching a wooden bridge in the common room, Lorraine, the community manager, stopped by. He glanced at my drawing and said, "Mr. Ben, you used to be an architect, didn't you?" "Yes, but it's been a long time since I drew anything seriously." "Why don't you start an architectural drawing class here? Many residents enjoy drawing, but no one's taught it properly." At first, the idea made me hesitate. I had left the profession, and part of me wasn't sure I still had the patience. But then I remembered what Harold once told me. The best way to keep your value is to share it. So 2 weeks later, I posted a notice on the bulletin board. Free architectural drawing class, all levels welcome. Tuesdays and Fridays, 3 p.m., common room. The first class had 8 people. I laid out large sheets of paper, pencils, rulers, and a few photos of buildings I had once designed. No one came with dreams of becoming an architect. They came out of curiosity, out of wanting to try something new. And I taught not just how to draw, but how to see, how to look at proportion, light, shadow, in the space between lines. Laughter filled the room when someone drew off scale or mixed up a measurement. I realized it had been a long time since I had heard that sound, the sound of a community that demanded nothing, imposed nothing, and simply shared time together. Outside of teaching hours, I spent more time for myself. I bought back my old set of drawing tools from an antique shop in town, placed my desk by the window facing the sea. In the afternoons, when sunlight slanted across the table, I sketched buildings that never existed, a kind of free creation I had rarely allowed myself before. Sometimes Harold would visit, bringing his wife's apple pie and updates on the matter with Emily. The investigation agency had gathered enough evidence to open an official case. I didn't ask about the final outcome. I knew the law would do its part, and I didn't need to witness it to feel I had already won. What I wanted to hold on to was this state of peace. One afternoon, walking along the shore with my camera in hand, I ran into Tyler, Mark and Emily's son, walking with a friend. He recognized me and seemed a little awkward. We greeted each other, never mentioning the adults. When he left, I took a picture of the two boys' shadows on the sand, the sunset stretching like a band of gold. That photo now hangs above my desk, a reminder that the next generation should not have to carry the mistakes of the one before. I also began taking part in community activities, outdoor concerts, seafood festivals, and fundraising events for the local library. Each time I met more people, heard more stories, and felt that I was no longer just the old man who'd been taken advantage of by his daughter, but Ben Callahan, a man still contributing to the life around him. Looking back, I realized I had gone from losing all control to no longer needing to control anything except myself. I had let go of the need to explain, convince, or prove my worth to anyone. Now, each morning when I stepped toward the sea, I no longer carry disappointment or anger. I carry only my camera, a few sheets of drawing paper, and a lightness. It took me many years to understand that sometimes rebirth is not about returning to who you were, but about building a new version of yourself, one shaped, however unintentionally, by past losses. And here at Golden Shore, among the sound of waves and the scent of salt in the air, I knew I had found the place to begin again. The news from Harold came on a March afternoon when I was tidying up the drawing board after class. He placed an envelope on the table. Inside was a copy of the official notice from the Pierce County Prosecutor's Office. Emily Callahan and her husband, Mark Foster, were under criminal investigation for financial fraud and signature forgery. I read each line, not fast, not slow, as if I were reading a construction contract, the kind of document I had been familiar with my entire life. There were cold terms, sufficient evidence, potential charges, possibility of prosecution. Harold added that my accounts had been placed under protective hold. The house deed and the trust fund were absolutely secure. No one, except me and the person I had legally authorized, could touch them. I nodded, set the envelope on the table, and thanked Harold. He gave a small smile as if knowing I would not break into any exclamation. True victory needed no cheers. It lay in the peace of knowing everything was back in its rightful place. That evening, I walked alone along the shore. The waves lapped steadily against the sand. The cold wind carried the smell of salt. I thought of the house in Ballard, the place I had lived before moving to Seattle with Emily. That house was still mine now, intact, standing firm. I could sell it, rent it, or simply keep it as part of my memories. But most importantly, I knew I had the right to decide, and no one could choose for me. I was no longer angry at Emily, not because I forgave her, but because anger was just another form of attachment, and I was free enough not to be bound by any negative feeling. The next day, I received another envelope, this time from Emily's lawyer. The letter was short. My client expresses a wish to reconcile and offers a sincere apology for past actions. Any support from you, however small, would be appreciated. I did not respond. That letter, along with all previous emails and messages, I placed in a thick file, clipped it shut, and locked it in the drawer. They were no longer knives aimed at me, but empty evidence to someone who had decided to step out of the game. A few weeks later, during a drawing class, a young student asked me, "Mr. Ben, if you were to design a house for someone who had lost everything, where would you start?" I smiled and answered, "I would start from the foundation. Without a strong foundation, everything above, will soon collapse. And the foundation is not just concrete or steel, it is trust. That answer was not only for the student, but also for myself, for Emily, for anyone who had ever believed that trust could be bought back. Because I knew well, once that foundation was broken, no matter how many times you rebuilt, an invisible crack would always remain. And that is why when closing this story, I only want to say one thing, the only thing worth remembering. You can rebuild a house, but once you have broken the foundation of trust, it will never be steady again. I believe that whoever hears this will understand. And if they do not, perhaps it is not yet their time to face that truth. If you are listening to this story, I hope it will remind you that your value is not in the money in your account or the assets you hold. It lies in your right to decide and in your ability to protect the foundation of trust within yourself. Be careful with those who walk into your life under the name of love, but slowly take away each brick of that trust. Do not wait until the walls collapse to realize the foundation had been hollowed out long ago. If this story touches you, subscribe to the channel and share it so more people will know how to guard their value and their trust within the family. Because sometimes it is silence and steadfastness that become the most powerful counterattack.